Hi everyone. We're here again to educate you on a few gardening topics. My name is Faith Reeves. I am the program coordinator for the Fairfield Garden Initiative program here in Fairfield, Iowa, and I'm also the local Bionutrient Food Association chapter leader. So if you're interested in learning more about gardening, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. My details will be in the description below. We're going to talk about seed saving. This is getting started with seed saving. So when you're thinking about seed saving, there are some considerations, and we're going to try to go through all of those. I do have notes here, so if you don't mind, I'll peek over here and look at my notes as we go along. But what are some important reasons, or maybe what are your reasons for saving seed? For me, it's I want to save seed from the healthiest plants out of my garden. I feel that those plants, who are the mothers of those seeds, have imparted those seeds with what they need to thrive in that space. And that was evidenced by the health of that plant and the flavor of its fruit. When seeds are in their maturing phases, as a mother plant is maturing her seed, she delivers to that seed all the nutrients and the core seed microbiomes that seed needs in order to successfully develop into the next generation plant. So you have a well-educated seed if you save seed from your garden, or if you share save seed from your local area within your region. Our climate and our environment and our management styles impact the development of a seed. It can change its vigor, it could change its epigenetics, it could shift the way it develops in an area. All of those impact a seed's development. So I like to save seed, so I have well-educated seed, well-informed and ready to grow right there in place in the native soil I place it. Another good reason to save your seed is seed sourcing. It's not always easy to find the varieties that you're looking for, and you may fall in love with a variety that you dearly love growing, but it's no longer available in the seed catalogs in a year or two past the last time you grew it, and then it could be lost to you. And so saving varieties that you've developed or have grown out in your garden and have loved, they're your favorites, and so they become a part of your seed family. So saving seeds because you love them is another reason. And then for your self-resilience, for your own well-being, having saved seed, knowing that your next year's gardening seed supply is tucked away safely and is ready for you the next season. This container, which is 0.5% of my seed library, is enough to start acres worth of garden. And so I know that my food needs will be met if I follow through with my commitment to grow these seeds out. We'll talk about seed viability a little bit during this talk, but mostly I just wanted to get through some of the reasons why one might save seed. And then what seeds are easiest to save in your garden? There are different types of seeds. We have annuals, biennials, and perennials. Annuals we see very frequently, and biennials, in our standard vegetable seed selection catalog, and we grow those out in our garden. Some of the annual open pollinated seeds are the easiest to save. And so those are going to be your beans. They're going to be peppers, which are actually perennials in different, in more southern climates, but we're here in zone 5A, unfortunately. They are not perennial outdoors, but you can bring them inside in the winter. We could talk about that in another module, how you might go about overwintering your pepper plants. But the peppers, the beans, lettuce, lettuce, tomatoes, and I have another one here. Well, actually that's it for the self-pollinated annuals. Those are easiest to save. They actually pollinate themselves, like the term, it's obvious because of the term self-pollinated. So you don't have to worry about them crossing with other varieties. A note on that, you don't have to worry about your vegetables crossing anyway if you are not trying to save a named variety. If you're not saving a cherished named variety for either sale or for maintaining it in your seed library, then having seeds cross only strengthens their genetic diversity. You might have a different plant on the other side of it. You might have a different type of tomato or a different type of pepper. And so thinking about spacing those plants a little bit farther apart if they do have the tendency to cross-pollinate. Tomatoes and peppers can cross-pollinate just a little, but it's not something that you really need to worry about unless you're dealing with sweet peppers and hot peppers, is what I've found. Keep your sweet peppers all planted in the same area, your hot peppers all planted in the same area, and save your seed that way. Separate them by a 1/4 acre if you possibly can. But if you are looking to save other seed varieties beyond those 4, like cross-pollinating annuals, that could be your broccoli. Broccoli is a brassica, but it is a cross-pollinating annual. It will or is pollinated by bees. And so you want to make sure that you have more than one plant in each seed saving block, and you want to, and that's going to be to support the vigor of those next generation broccoli plants. If they cross themselves, because they're not self-pollinating, if they cross themselves, they could potentially have a reduced vigor. They will inbreed to the point where your seed will lose its vigor. So think about that when you're doing broccoli. Grow more than one plant. Grow 4, 5, 6 plants, and then save the seed from your most vibrant plant. And then some other other plants to think about cross-pollinating. One of the most common is going to be corn. Corn is wind pollinated. And so if you are planting your sweet corn next to your flank corn, then you are potentially going to have an issue with cross-pollination. One way to kind of get around that is to work with varieties or schedule your planting timing to the point where the silks will not be out at the same time as the other variety of corn, so that they don't cross-pollinate. We're here in Iowa, and so we are in corn country for sure. So you need to plant your corn pretty early, or you need to plant it pretty late in order to get outside of the potential of cross-pollination. But it's possible. Cucumbers, they are one that, again, is bee pollinated, insect pollinated. So, and they will cross with themselves, but they don't cross with other vining cucurbits. So you don't have to worry about them crossing with your squash, but they will cross with themselves. And so in the realm of cross-pollination annuals, think about, are you trying to protect a variety that you really enjoy? If that's the case, just plant that one variety if you don't have the space to separate those types of plants, cucumber and cucumber. Squash and pumpkins, they can cross-pollinate, and it's fine. They are not going to lose vigor if they cross-pollinate with their own pollen, and but they will cross-pollinate easily with themselves. And so, zucchini and summer squash, they're definitely going to cross-pollinate if they're close together. Your winter squashes, pumpkins can cross-pollinate, and you can get some pretty unique children, next generation, from those crosses. And so it's an experiment. It's a surprise. You'll see, But if you're trying to protect a particular variety, then plant that one variety of winter squash, that one variety of cucumber, that one variety of zucchini to prevent the surprises in the next growing season. Biennials, your brassicas traditionally are biennials. That's going to be your kale, your cabbage, your mustards. You can have different varieties of brassicas in the same growing, like kale that crosses. I haven't had too much issue with that, but it will definitely cross. Being that they are biennials, that means that they either need to overwinter in your garden, or they need to be brought in, dug up and brought in and stored over the winter with their root balls stored in moist sawdust and then brought back out as soon as the soil is able to be worked in the spring, and they can finish their life cycle that way. They're a little more complicated to save seeds from those cross-pollinating biennials. We won't go into that too deeply, but I have had great success with my kale plants overwintering in the garden with a little bit of protection, you know, a heavy mulch or maybe a thick row cover or frost blanket to keep them from dying out on winters that aren't extremely harsh. And then they will revive in the spring and go to their seed reproductive cycle. So they will go into their flowering and go to make seed, provided that they have enough vigor to do that, which is wonderful. So perennials, most perennials are, you know, depending on what type of perennial. So we have asparagus and rhubarb, you know, many of the, you know, something like a walking onion, or they will create seed, but they also can be divided at their crown, so cloning. That's something that you can, you know, look into. It's a wonderful way to replicate your mother plants, dividing the crown and transplanting those into the garden for the next season. But plants like asparagus and rhubarb do put up flowering stalks, or the rhubarb will put up flowering stalks. The asparagus will create red berries in the fall, and once the ferns are dried down, brown, and go to fall over in the fall, those berries should be nice and ripe, nice and red. That's a good time to harvest those, and you can start new asparagus plants from your seed that you've saved. Same with the rhubarb. They will put their flowering stalks up in the summer, late spring, early summer, depends. If you allow them to do that, they then will produce seed if they are of a variety that produces viable seed. So we're going to go into just some basic seed saving tutorial, a little practical here. We have beans. So one thing to keep in mind, I was talking about that core seed microbiome, where the mother plant imparts, it's called vertical transmission, where the mother plant, just like a mother of any animal, would impart the microbiome that child, whatever it is, animal or plant, would need in order to complete its life cycle in its generation. And so annuals, their life cycle is relatively short, anywhere from 3 to 8 months in length. And so that mother plant, as she's ripening her seed toward the end of her own life, will impart the seed with a core seed microbiome. And so this seed has everything it needs to germinate. It can be placed in the soil, and it has enough nutrients and the microbes to associate with it, provided that it was grown in healthy soil, in a microbially rich soil where those microbes actually existed. So the microbes that the mother plant is moving into the seed actually come from the soil. And so this core seed microbiome is here. Provided that that seed is stored properly, then it is still, that microbiome is viable. So when you're thinking about having beans as a mother plant, as a saved seed, you want to make sure that that bean plant, one, was healthy, produced yummy beans for you. You enjoyed eating them. Let the beans ripen on the vine to the point where the vine dies down and the beans dry down. Let them go ahead and dry all the way down. If weather conditions are conducive, allow the bean to remain on the plant until it dries completely down. It's not every season that you can allow that to happen. We can have really moist falls, but one thing you could do is let the bean go ahead and mature to the point where it is starting to dry down, pick the bean, and then place it in an area where you can still have air, air exchange in a way. They need air, a little bit of air in their dry down process. And so beans and peas both do prefer to have a little bit of air, and even in their storage. You can store your beans just like this in a paper bag once they're completely dried down, and they will be viable for many, many years, 5 to 10 years. It just depends, provided that you keep them away from moisture. Moisture will deteriorate or destroy the viability of your seed. They don't need to be maintained in a completely dark space, but it is ideal for it to be dark and cool and absolutely very dry. So really low humidity. You'll know that your bean seed is ready to save and to tuck away into a sealed container when you cannot press into the outer layer of the seed, that exoderm. You cannot make a mark on the bean seed. So these are definitely ready to store. What you would do is you would take something very simple like a coin envelope and place your seed in the coin envelope and then tuck them away in a sealed container, somewhere where they're going to be safe from moisture and rodents or over light exposure. So that's beans, and they're an easy seed to save. And again, you will have more beans. If you start saving your bean seeds, you will have more beans than you know what to do with on the other side. So share them, get involved in a seed swap, because you end up saving way more beans than what you'll ever need to plant. In a home garden, you may plant, 50 to 100 bean plants, and that's a lot. And you might want a couple varieties because they don't cross-pollinate very easily, and you want to have a couple different varieties. You want a green bean, and you want a nice storage soup bean, or however, a broad bean. So consider sharing those in a seed swap. Another thing to consider, though, with beans and peas alike, when you are selecting your mother plant to produce mature beans, or you happen to just leave beans on your plants and you didn't select your mother plant and they just dry on the plant, the plant itself will start to slow down its production of flowers and thus more beans. It'll stop producing fruit. It'll stop producing beans if you leave bean seed to mature. That's its goal, is to mature bean seed. And so once that's done, then the plant will go ahead and senesce or die. So think about your harvest. There's a point when you're going to be done with harvesting beans and you're ready just to let them mature on the vine, and that's fine. But when you're still harvesting from the plants and you don't have one particular or two particular plants selected as your seed saving plants, then just remember to keep the beans coming off of the plant so that you can keep your harvests up while the plants are still healthy. Then allow the mother plants to go ahead and ripen the beans when you are done. When you're ready to just say, I'm done harvesting those beans, now we're going to save seed, that's fine to do that, just to stop harvesting. But try to make sure that your bean plant is still vital, happy, healthy. You want to save seed that came from a mother who was vital, happy, and healthy. So those beans need to be started in their maturing process while that mother plant is still in that condition. For peppers, they're pretty easy to save seed from. I would be cautious. I know that this is a heat pepper. I love hot peppers. I know this is a heat pepper. Whenever you're chopping your peppers on your cutting board in the kitchen, if you are handling them without gloves, not to touch your face or your eyes. Same when you're saving the seeds. That oily substance that makes them hot is still present even when they're dried down. So I allow my peppers to dry down, my seeds to mature as long as I can on the plant. Remember, the pepper plant is tender, and so it will be damaged by the cold. But in many cases, your peppers haven't completely finished ripening. And so you may have to pull a pepper off of your plant after it has changed its color, it's become red, and it's ready to eat. You may then have to allow that to finish ripening indoors if your season is getting short. Peppers are a long season fruit. You know, they take a long time to develop and then mature on the plant, similar to tomatoes. So when you're saving your peppers, I just go ahead and slice them open so that I don't have mold issues inside the pepper as it's continuing to finish its seed on the inside. That seed is drying down. There's still a mother to seed transfer going on, even though this pepper is no longer attached to the plant. And so I allow that seed to mature inside the pepper as long as I can tolerate it. And then I will go ahead and save the seed. And so to save the seed, it's really simple. You just break that out into a dish. And now if these are fresh peppers, if you opt to save the seed while it's still fresh, like the flesh of the pepper is still fresh, then I would put that on a piece of parchment. I use that a lot for moist seeds. I'll just put it on a piece of parchment like it's a little tray, and that way I can write the variety, the date, and any other identifying information or details that I'd like to have translate onto the seed pack for that particular seed variety. It's really important to make a label when you're saving seeds that you might be saving many of. You're certainly not going to have an issue telling a pepper seed from a bean seed, but you will have issue telling pepper seeds from pepper seeds. And so make sure you're labeling your seed saving procedure. You know, whether it's straight out of the pepper onto a piece of parchment, label that. When it's parchment after the seed is dried into an envelope, a seed envelope, make sure you label that. Put the date on it, the date that you harvested that. It doesn't have to be precise to the day, but I put the year that I harvested that particular seed so that I know how viable it is. You know, I'll do germination tests if I have seed that's 4 or 5 years old. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Lettuce is another one of those annual varieties, open-pollinated, self-pollinated, that do not cross very easily. They can, absolutely, they can cross, but it's not too much of an issue. Usually you're going to have the seed stay pretty true to variety. So tomatoes, you can see what happens when the tomato plant bolts. It'll put up those little daisy-like flowers, little aster-like flowers, and then they will mature their seed, and you'll know that the seed is mature when you see the little fluff, like a dandelion, very much like dandelion seed. Very tiny, very, very, very tiny. And so if you don't get to this seed before it starts to blow away, you'll lose it. And so what I do is I'll go into the garden after my seed is matured. I am already seeing the white fluff from the mother plant. I will go and I'll just cut it at the base of the flowering stalk, and then I'll put this upside down in a paper bag to let it finish drying. I don't want to save the seed from here until I am ready to process it and put it away. And so with a lettuce variety, some other seeds are done this way very nicely as well. I'll put it in a paper bag. It's going to be loud. And I'll just knock the seed off as much as I can. And then I will also go in with my hand and rub my hand over those flowers. It's a very dusty process. You may want to do it outside or, you know, with good ventilation. There will be lots of dust and fluff flying around, but it's pretty easy just to break those little seed heads off and break them down, you know, catch them in your paper bag. And that saves a lot of mess. I will say though, that the more precise you can be with breaking those little seeds out of their flower heads here, out of their little, you know, the flower turned into seeds, and then that little seed pod is ripened seed, if you can be pretty precise with breaking that off and not getting a bunch of extra biomass in your bag, that's going to help you in the separation process. And so with tomatoes, or excuse me, with lettuce and other really small seeds like this, it's a good idea to get some of that extra fluff out of there, that extra plant material, because it could create a little bit of a mold issue when you go to start those seeds the next season, because you'll have all that organic matter. It's not critical that you get really clean with your seeds. You're not selling these seeds. If you were, you would get really clean with the seeds. You get all that extra organic matter out of there. But with self-saved seeds, home-saved seeds, you don't have to worry about it being too clean, but you may want to go through the process of cleaning it up a bit. And one way to do that, or a common way to do that, is to use different size sieves. And so this is just a stainless steel sieve that you would have in your kitchen, and it's ideal for saving the lettuce seed, because, and it would be similar for carrot seed, or something like an arugula. Really tiny seeds might fall through this sieve size. And so you've got clean seed in your tray or your bowl, and then you have the organic matter that's residual, which is great. And then you would take that seed, pour it into a seed pack, and label it, tuck it away in a dry, cool, dark place in a container where it's safe from all of those things. You can go to your local thrift store or anywhere that you can find different size colanders and select many different sizes, 3, 4, 5 different sizes of holes. And this will really help you narrow down your organic matter to viable clean seed. And so I keep a whole suite of these just for seed saving, where I will take, whatever type of seed I'm trying to separate from the plant material, I'll take it and run it through one size, and then the next, and then the next, until I get seed that I find to be just clean enough. And then I'll go ahead and tuck it away. You can also do that winnowing process where you can use a fan or the wind outside if you are working with seed that has a lot of extra organic matter, like a basil seed or tomato seed or any plant like that, your kale or your Brussels sprout seed. You end up having refuge plant material in the container where you separate your seed. As you're moving it from one hole size to another, one colander to the next, there's an opportunity to get a little wind action going. The seed is heavier than the organic matter itself in many cases, and the organic matter will start to blow away. You can certainly find lots of tips on how to winnow your seeds outdoors. It's ideal to do outdoors because it is pretty messy. All right, and so that's your, tomatoes. And also this kind of goes along with tomatillos and cucumbers. They are a type of seed that has a gelatinous coating around the seed itself. And so when you cut open a tomato and you squeeze it, so you just cut it in half and you squeeze it into a bowl, what comes out is going to be that gelatinous seed material. And so those little ovaries, the little seeds, there's this coating that protects that seed. In order to make seed starting easy the next season, or whenever it is you're going to start those seeds, 5 years from now or however, planting those seeds first is a good idea. And so you would take your tomato, say, cut it in half, and then squeeze that into a container. Same with your or, well, I'll say a little something about the tomatillo. Same with your cucumber. If you have a very ripe cucumber, again, you want to let the tomato ripen on the mother plant as long as possible until the fruit is, in essence, almost ready to fall off of the vine with the tomato. And with the cucumber, you want to let that cucumber develop until it becomes a huge, just a big old cucumber that you wouldn't eat because, it'd be real pithy. It'll turn yellow, kind of golden color. That's a good time to harvest. And then when it's time to cut those open to save the seed, you would cut that cucumber in half, scrape the seed into a bowl, and so you've got the seed covered in the little gelatinous material. You let that ferment in a bowl for 3-4 days, and then after that has happened, you can take and run water into that bowl and kind of decant that water off of the seed material. The residual organic matter, that substance that was around the seed, will fall away, and the seed will start to collect at the bottom of your container. So having a dish that is, deep enough to where the seed can reside, lower down. Heavy seed is seed that is more mineral rich, mineral imbibed, and so that's going to be a little bit more vital seed. Seed that floats on the top could be immature seed or seed that is not as minerally imbibed. And so if some of those floaters fall off, that's fine, just let them go. But do make sure that you are capturing some of the seed, hopefully at the bottom, that's sunk to the bottom. Keep the sinkers. The floaters could potentially germinate. They may not be as vital or vibrant of a plant, but I give everybody a chance. So it's up to you, but do keep the sinkers. So the tomatillo is very similar. What I do is I actually take the tomatillo, cut it in half, and I will put it in a Vitamix with a little bit of water. They have really tiny seeds and a lot of flesh that's kind of firm, different than a tomato. You can squeeze it out, but it's really kind of difficult to separate seed from the pulp of the tomatillo. I just run the Vitamixer on low for 30 seconds or something, and then decant off of that the floating material. Do that once or twice, and then you'll have a little pool of tomatillo seeds that collect at the bottom. And then decant all the water off, whether it's the tomato, which you let ferment for 3 or 4 days, cucumber, which you let ferment for 3 or 4 days, or the tomatillo, which doesn't need to ferment, but you do need to go through a process to get the residual off. Once you remove all the water, just pour it all out of the container and then place that on your parchment paper. This is where parchment paper really comes in handy for those wet seeds, wet save seeds. And so mark your date, your variety, where it was grown, whatever else you want on your seed packet, and then put your seed on here to dry. Spread it out a little bit and let it dry. Keep them, wherever you have space to allow them to dry. And then once they're dry, put them away in their seed pack. Label your seed packs. Some seeds don't save very long. Some seeds are not viable very long. I found okra to be one that is not viable very long. This is okra, and just like the beans, if you let the okra get away from you, and some of them get too big in order to eat, just like the beans, they'll get woody and stringy and not fun to eat. You could allow them to stay on the plant to ripen for seed, or you could cut those off or break the bean off if you're still in your harvesting phase for that plant and wait a little while. Ideally, I do like to select a mother plant and say, you are the one that I'm going to save seed from, and then I don't harvest from that plant. And I just let it go through the process of maturing seed while the plant is vital and healthy. The okra is really easy to save seed from, and this is a little seed packet. Provided that it dried down all right, you certainly don't need to get it out of here until you're ready to plant. It's clean seed, just like bean, nice clean seed that has no residual organic matter that you need to worry about. Provided that it was able to dry down completely, you're not going to have a mold issue or anything like that. But okra is potentially a seed that doesn't have a very long shelf life, so save your seed from your okra every year. Leeks, onions, corn, they do not have long shelf lives, and so you'll want to save your seed from those varieties every year if you opt to do that. Again, the corn cross-pollinates very easily when pollinated, so you want to be mindful of that. If you're not able to provide enough plants, you want a block of plants so you maintain vigor of the same variety, in a block, a 4x4 block of corn plants, so you can maintain vigor in your variety. If you're not able to do that, then I would just purchase my seed. But if you do opt to save your corn seed, then allow them to mature on the plant until the plant dries down, break the cobs off, and then tie the cobs up and allow them to dry where there's good airflow. And they can stay like that as long as they're protected from rodents until you're ready to plant. Easy to break that right off the cob. With the onions and the leeks, they are biennials, and so something like an onion may not be able to make it through the winter here. Our winters are pretty harsh. I have had it happen, especially if they're mulched in, and then you'll get a seed stalk early in the growing season in the spring. Same with leeks. If you allow them to overwinter, they go through that vernalization, that cool season, they will go straight to reproductive phase the next season. But if you have onions that you either forgot to harvest or were still, they didn't size up for you the season before, you could still, or you can pull onions that did size up and store them and replant them in the spring if you want to do that, if you want to save your onion seed. I feel like just allowing them to overwinter, if you can mulch them in, is the best way. Leeks are very hardy. They can overwinter. And they do cross. Onions and leeks will cross. And so think about that when you think about spacing. You want an onion that bulbs and not an onion that is a leek. So think about that. All right. And so we've talked about, why to save seed, how to kind of wrap your mind around planning to save seed. When you are starting your garden planning for the season, you're thinking about spacing your plants out, consider seed saving. Maybe start with one variety, or maybe just start with the beans, tomatoes, lettuce, and peppers. Get your feet wet saving seed, and that will get you going for future seed saving. You'll start building your seed library. But I would consider marking, as you get into the growing season and you are observing that you've got a really healthy plant that's producing really vivacious fruit that you love, consider marking the plant. This is great to do that, or something that's a little more visible, or just a little, flag, like a little surveying flag. Mark the plant so hey, don't cut this one down. I am actually saving seed. You can forget. It's pretty easy to forget which plants are which and what you were intending to do from beginning of season to end. But it's time to start thinking about seed saving when you're planning your garden. So if you have varieties that are potentially going to cross, consider that. Do you have enough space to separate them out? Figure out what the distance is for them. How are they pollinated? Are they wind pollinated, or are they insect pollinated? Are they self-pollinated? You'll get some more information on how to space those plants out and which plants do best to save seed from if they are in close proximity. Again, you're going to get a little more vigor from a plant that has a lot of genetic diversity from it, but you may not get a really yummy fruit on the other side of it. So it just depends. And then the storage of the seeds after you've saved them, again, you want to make sure you've got a low moisture environment, low light, and they're protected from your pest, whether it be mice or, the grain moths will definitely eat seed. Little weevils will eat seed. And so you want to make sure you have a container that's sealed away from all of those. And when you're considering the next season, it's time to figure out if you did a good job with your seed saving. And you can do this in the winter as well. You don't need to have a optimal growing environment to do this. You can create your own optimal growing environment to check the germination rate on your seed. And so what I suggest doing is taking 10 seeds, or a number that you tracked, whether 10 is easy because it's easy to extrapolate out the percentage of viable seed. So you can take 10, you can take 50 seeds, whatever is easy for you to do. And then, so these are beans that are ready to participate in the garden potentially. What I do is I take a paper towel, I mark on the paper towel what I've got. And so I would mark here that these are, if I'm not mistaken, Kentucky Wonder beans. So I'd mark that and the date. I would wrap my 10 seeds up just kind of in a little packet. I would moisten this with, you know, the RO water, your water that you would normally drink, whatever that is. Just moisten it to the point of damp, but not dripping wet. Moisten it just enough. Got 10 seeds in here. And then I would just place it in a plastic bag, you know, make sure it's clean. You don't want to have a mold issue develop in here, but this is just a spice bag that had, I think, nutmeg in it, you know, nutmeg seed pods, and so there's not any residual material in here. And so I just place it in the bag, and then I put that in a space which is warm enough for that seed to germinate. So you've got the moisture, humidity covered. That seed will imbibe with water. You want to make sure the temperature is appropriate, and so somewhere above 68, 70 degrees is good. So that can be in the winter inside your house. It doesn't need to be a high light environment. You're just wanting to figure out, will these germinate? And so bean seeds will germinate anywhere from 5 to 10 days, could be a little longer, and that gives you an idea of their vitality. So after your time is up, mark the calendar on your phone, make a little alarm so you're like, oh, I need to go back and check these germination tests. And you can do many at once, right? You can do your beans, your lettuce, your tomatoes, your peppers, all in their own little bags, or at least wrapped in their own little pieces of paper towel, moistened. The plastic bag will keep the towel moist for the duration. It should be fine. You don't need to seal it, but I wouldn't have it wide open where the bag is, where the towel's going to dry out. I usually just fold it over, but I don't seal it completely. The seeds can do with a little oxygen. I set it to the side and I go back and check it in 5 or 10 days, however long it takes for that particular type of seed to germinate. And when I open up the paper towel, I then know my germination percentage. Hopefully you've got all 10 seeds that germinated, but if you only have 8, there you go. You've got an 80% germination rate. So you know the seed's viable for the next season. So you can do this in the winter, and then you know you've got viable seed for the spring. But you can also do it late in the winter, early spring, just before you're going to start your seed starting, if you need to do that. It's a good time. All right. And so I will make sure that there are some good seed saving resources in the description below. If they're not there, check back. They'll be coming. I'll have some great seed saving books that you might consider looking into, and maybe a list of things to keep on your seed saving shelf. All right. Thank you.